Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei has been eliminated. Along with him, the country's defense minister, the secretary of the National Security Council, the head of the supreme leader's military bureau, the commander of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and the head of intelligence are also gone. All of this is the result of a joint operation by the US and Israel in response to Tehran's refusal to stop developing nuclear weapons and to cease uranium enrichment. Where Russia, the strategic partner of the Iranian regime, was at that moment is unknown. Moscow's support in this matter is merely moral, condemning the US-Israeli strike and offering condolences to the victims. Why didn't the Kremlin's formidable military machine come to the defense of its ally? Let's figure it out now. On January 17, 2025, Moscow and Tehran signed a comprehensive strategic partnership agreement. By April 8th, the State Duma of the Russian Federation had unanimously ratified it. The document included a clause on cooperation in the fields of security and defense. This, in particular, led to an increase in Russian purchases of Iranian weapons. And according to Bloomberg, the Kremlin purchased ballistic and anti-aircraft missiles for the war against Ukraine worth nearly $3 billion. That includes hundreds of Fete 360 short-range ballistic missiles, nearly 500 other short-range ballistic missiles, and about 200 anti-aircraft missiles related to air defense systems. Iran has also supplied Russia with millions of rounds of ammunition and artillery shells. It's also worth noting the deliveries and subsequent transfer of technology for the production of Shahed drones, which Russia uses daily to terrorize Ukrainian cities. But when it came time for Russia to return the favor to Iran, all Putin did was express his condolences over the death of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. And that was basically it. Well, actually, there was also a statement at the UN.
The actions taken by Washington and West Jerusalem are nothing more than yet another unprovoked act of armed aggression against a sovereign and independent UN member state in violation of the charter of the organization and the fundamental principles of international law.
Attention! Russia believes that such actions violate international law. Interestingly, in their view, Moscow's actions against Ukraine do not violate international law. But all it is just diplomatic statements that don't mean anything. What's much more interesting is why the Kremlin didn't help its ally. There are two possible reasons here. According to analysts at the Institute for the Study of War, Russia is now so bogged down in the war against Ukraine that it simply can't spread its forces or help anyone else. But there's also an alternative scenario. The Kremlin never intended to help Tehran defend itself, since it has become less dependent on Iranian arms supplies.
Russia made similar condemnations during the war in June 2025, but was unable to provide Iran with more substantial support to defend against Israeli and later American strikes. Russia's war in Ukraine limits its ability to provide military assistance to Iran. This also highlights that, over time, Russia has become less dependent on Iran in its military operations, as it localized the production of much of what it previously imported from the Islamic Republic, and subsequently became much more reliant on North Korea, according to a report by the Institute for the Study of War.
After all, Tehran has played a truly significant role in supporting Russia's tactics of terrorizing Ukrainians. The Shahed attack drone has become a key UAV in the Russian army's raids on Ukrainian cities. Residents of Ukraine and various regions hear this buzzing sound, reminiscent of an approaching moped, every day. President Volodymyr Zelensky reported that during the full-scale war Russia has waged against Ukraine, the aggressor country's army has already launched more than 57,000 of these drones at Ukraine.
Even though Ukrainians have never threatened Iran, Even though Ukrainians have never threatened Iran, the Iranian regime itself chose to become an accomplice to Putin and supplied him with Shaheds, not only the drones themselves, but also the technology. Iran has also provided other weapons to Russia. During the full-scale war, the Russians have used more than 57,000 Shahed-type attack drones against Ukraine, against our people, our cities, and our energy infrastructure.
And you can't say that the Ayatollah regime wasn't counting on support from Moscow. As Politico reports, on February 28th, when Tehran was hit by American and Israeli strikes, the Iranian foreign minister called his Russian counterpart Lavrov. Surely the Iranian side was expecting at least some help. But the Russian minister only offered his Iranian counterpart condolences and promised verbal support, Politico writes. Thus, Iran became yet another country, after Syria and Venezuela, to experience firsthand what partnership with Russia really means.
At the end of 2024, Bashar Assad in Syria learned from his own experience that Russian support does not guarantee the survival of his regime when rebel forces stormed Damascus. Nicolas Maduro, who has been in an American prison cell since the beginning of this year, is probably also wondering where the Kremlin was in his time of need. Now, Iran risks becoming yet another example of the gap between the Kremlin's loud declarations in the face of American hegemony and the real world, where that hegemony is becoming increasingly apparent. From a Politico publication,
Putin's personal imperial ambitions have already cost Russia its influence in Central Asia, which is strengthening its economic cooperation with the EU. In the Caucasus, Armenia has already suspended its membership in the CSTO and is preparing to leave the organization. In Latin America, Nicolas Maduro, once the leader of a regime friendly to Moscow and Venezuela, is sending greetings from an American prison. And in the Middle East, there's been a loss of two key partners, Syria and now Iran.
Putin's efforts to personally manage problems in relations with key international partners show the Kremlin's desire to preserve what remains of its influence. Throughout the entire period of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the Kremlin has continued to engage with countries willing to cooperate, despite being isolated by the West. These countries maintain contact with Moscow without severing ties. However, their actions clearly show just how much Russian influence has been undermined. From a publication by the Jamestown Foundation, an analytical center focused on security and political events in Eurasia.
What happened in Iran should make Putin reflect on his own fate, according to Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha. In his opinion, autocrats falling like dominoes is a sign of a dramatic decline of Moscow's global influence.
Assad, Maduro, and now Khamenei. Putin has lost three of his closest allies in just over a year, and he didn't help any of them. This dynamic shows three things. First, Russia is not a reliable ally, even for those who depend on it heavily. Second, while Russia is bogged down in its senseless war against Ukraine, a war it will never win and refuses to end, its influence around the world is rapidly declining. Third, the domino effect of overthrown dictators must continue, and Putin's own fall is inevitable someday. Andriy Sybiha, Ukraine's Minister of Foreign Affairs, on social network X.
Back to Iran. Russia is losing not just a partner that helps supply weapons, but also a country that helped it circumvent Western sanctions. Moreover, if the Ayatollah's regime in Iran falls, all sanctioned oil could stop being toxic and start being traded openly. And that would be a death sentence for Russian fuel. Because if there's no longer any demand for it, Russia's economic finances will shrink dramatically, as will Putin's ability to continue his aggressive war against Ukraine.